Mark and Lisa Thompson had always dreamed of living in a peaceful, friendly neighborhood. After years of renting apartments in the bustling city, they finally saved enough money to buy a small house with a white picket fence in a quiet suburb. The streets were lined with maple and oak trees, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. Birds chirped in the mornings, and children's laughter often echoed from yards where they played freely. It was everything they had imagined: calm, safe, and welcoming. Lisa loved mornings the most. She would sip her coffee on the small porch overlooking their garden, watching dew sparkle on the grass while Mark read the newspaper beside her. Life seemed simple, almost idyllic. But lately, something had shifted. A small group of residents had formed a homeowners association, claiming they were trying to protect the neighborhood and enforce rules about everything from parking on the street to trimming bushes. The Thompsons had mostly ignored them, focusing on their lives, but Lisa couldn't shake a feeling of unease whenever she saw the group patrolling the streets. Lisa had been trained to notice details, a skill she carried from her years in the military. Nothing in her neighborhood felt wrong at first glance, but there were small signs: men in uniforms standing too long near houses they didn't belong to, cars parked in strange ways, and the occasional whispered conversation among neighbors that fell silent when she approached. Mark, ever optimistic and trusting, often brushed it off. "It's just neighborhood drama," he would say with a reassuring smile. But Lisa's instincts warned her otherwise. On that particular Friday, the day started like any other. Mark left early for work, waving as he drove off in his car. Lisa stayed behind, finishing some paperwork and checking on the garden. The sun had just risen above the horizon, casting golden light across the quiet street. She felt a sense of calm as she walked along the driveway, watering the flowers and checking the mail. It was routine, mundane, and comforting, exactly what she loved about this place. Then she noticed the men. Two figures stood near her driveway. Their uniforms looked official at first glance: dark vests, badges clipped to their chests, and the kind of authoritative posture that made people pause. But something was off. Lisa squinted, trying to recognize them. She didn't know them. They didn't have the usual polite neighborly smile or wave. Instead, they were watching her house closely, speaking quietly to each other, as if they were on a mission. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. Her military training kicked in instantly. Years of drills, scenarios, and critical thinking flashed through her mind. She scanned the street for escape routes, noted the positions of the men, and considered her options. She didn't panic, but she didn't ignore the threat either. Her heart beat steadily, controlled and focused. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice firm but calm. "Who are you, and what are you doing on my property?" The men didn't smile or introduce themselves. Instead, one of them stepped forward, his expression serious. "We're with the Homeowners Association," he said. "We need to check your property." "Step back, please." Lisa's eyes narrowed. She had expected polite authority, not an aggressive command. "I don't recognize your authority to do that," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "Please identify yourselves properly, with your names and credentials." The men hesitated, glancing at each other. Something in Lisa's stance must have made them pause. She wasn't yelling, but she wasn't submissive either. Her hand rested lightly near the small, legal firearm she carried, a habit she never abandoned after her years in service. She had never had to use it in anger, but she was prepared if the situation escalated. The first man tried to assert control. "We're just doing our job," he said, his voice firm. "We have to enforce neighborhood rules." Step aside. Lisa shook her head slowly. No, she said simply. I am on my property, and I have a right to be here without being harassed. If you have a legitimate concern, call the police. Until then, step back. From inside the house, Mark had heard the exchange. He ran out, grocery bags in hand, his face full of shock. Lisa, what's happening? He asked, scanning the two men with confusion. Lisa didn't turn her head. Mark, stay behind me, she said calmly. These men are not who they claim to be. Something feels wrong. Mark froze for a moment, unsure whether to intervene. He had always admired Lisa's confidence and her calm under pressure, but seeing it now made his heart race. He realized that this was serious. The men, noticing Mark, seemed slightly startled. They hadn't expected anyone else to be present. Lisa took a slow step forward, maintaining eye contact with the closest man. I am armed and trained, she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority and calm. Take a step back. Do not make any sudden movements. I am asking you one last time. The men exchanged nervous glances. Lisa's composure, the firmness in her tone, and the visible readiness to defend herself made them hesitate. For a moment, it seemed as if time had slowed. The quiet neighborhood, once peaceful, now held a tense silence. Birds stopped chirping, and the faint sound of children playing in the distance felt far away. Finally, one of the men muttered something about a misunderstanding, and both of them backed away slowly. Lisa did not relax. She kept her hand near her firearm, eyes locked on them until they turned the corner and disappeared down the street. Only then did she lower her hand slightly, letting out a quiet breath. Mark rushed to her side, wrapping his arms around her. Lisa, that was. I don't even know what to say, he stammered. You kept us safe. I didn't realize how serious that could have been. Lisa shook her head gently. It's okay, she said. We need to be careful, but panicking doesn't help. We handle it with caution, not fear. They went back inside, locking the doors and calling the local police. Within minutes, an officer arrived, listening carefully as Lisa and Mark explained what had happened. After checking the details, the officer confirmed that the men were not law enforcement and had no official authority. They were imposters, using fake badges and uniforms to intimidate residents. The realization hit both Lisa and Mark hard. Their quiet, peaceful neighborhood had been violated by people pretending to hold power. But even as fear lingered, a sense of relief followed. They had faced the threat together, and Lisa's calm, decisive actions had prevented anything worse from happening. Neighbors soon came out to check on them, hearing snippets of the story. Some were shocked, some were angry, but all were grateful that no one was hurt. The Thompsons became an example of courage and composure. Lisa, who had always been humble about her military past, realized that the training she had often taken for granted had just saved her family. That evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Lisa and Mark sat on their porch again, holding coffee cups and reflecting on the day. The neighborhood was quiet once more, but things had changed. There was a new awareness, a new vigilance. And though fear had tried to creep in, it had been met with courage, clarity, and the unspoken bond between them. Lisa looked at the horizon, her thoughts calm but sharp. We'll need to be careful, she said softly. But we can handle it. Together. Mark nodded, squeezing her hand. Together, he echoed. And in that quiet street, beneath the swaying maples, the Thompsons found a renewed sense of strength, a reminder that courage is not just about facing danger, but about standing firm, protecting what matters, and never underestimating your own power. The morning after the frightening encounter, Lisa Thompson woke early, as she always did. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting golden lines across the bedroom floor. The memory of the two men in fake uniforms still lingered in her mind, but she pushed herself to stay calm. Fear was useless, she knew. What mattered now was preparation. Mark, still shaken by the previous day's events, was already awake in the kitchen, making coffee. The aroma filled the house, but it did little to ease his nerves. He kept glancing toward the front windows, half expecting the imposters to return. Lisa walked in, dressed in her casual morning clothes but with a sharp, alert look in her eyes. "Good morning," Mark said, trying to smile. "Did you sleep at all?" Lisa shook her head slightly. "Sleep came in short bursts," she admitted. "But that's okay. We need to think clearly today. I want to know everything about what happened and make sure it never happens again." Mark nodded. "I still can't believe they had the nerve to come onto our property. Do they think anyone could just let them do that?" Lisa sighed. "Some people think uniforms give them power, even when it's fake. They count on fear. They didn't expect me to stay calm." The couple spent the next hour discussing the incident in detail. Lisa described the men's behavior, the way they tried to intimidate her, and the subtle things she noticed that made her realize they weren't real officers. Mark added his perspective from inside the house, noting how quickly he had felt panic and how grateful he was that Lisa had taken charge. Once they had recounted the events, Lisa made a plan. "We'll document everything," she said, reaching for a notebook. "Times, descriptions, license plates, what they said. The police will need evidence. And I want cameras. Everywhere. Front, back, driveway. We cannot leave our home vulnerable." Mark agreed without hesitation. They spent the morning installing cameras at strategic points around the house. Lisa carefully adjusted each one, making sure it covered blind spots and areas where someone could approach unnoticed. She checked angles, lighting, and motion detection. Her military training made her meticulous, nothing could be left to chance. By late morning, the Thompsons had transformed their home into a careful balance of openness and protection. The garden still bloomed, the front porch remained inviting, but every approach to the house was now monitored. Even the neighbors who had watched curiously from across the street seemed impressed by the professional way Lisa had handled things. As Lisa finished the last camera, a sense of unease crept back. The imposters hadn't returned, but she knew that people who acted with such boldness rarely gave up so easily. She turned to Mark, her expression serious. "They'll probably come back," she said softly. "We need to be ready. Not with anger, not with panic, but with focus. And if they make one wrong move, they'll see that this is not a house they can intimidate." Mark reached for her hand. "I trust you," he said. "I always have. But I still feel like we're walking into a trap." Lisa nodded. "It's normal to feel that way. Fear is a natural response. But it doesn't control us. We control it." The couple spent the afternoon reviewing the neighborhood. They talked to other residents quietly, asking if anyone else had encountered the same men. A few neighbors admitted that they had seen the two imposters lingering near houses, asking strange questions, and sometimes taking notes on property details. Some had felt uneasy but were too afraid to confront the men. "It's worse than I thought," Mark said, Frowning. They've been at this for a while, quietly intimidating people. Lisa's jaw tightened. Which is why we can't ignore it. They need to know they can't push us around. And if the authorities get involved, these tactics will be stopped before anyone else gets hurt. Later that evening, Lisa decided to go for a walk around the neighborhood, casually but with keen observation. She wore comfortable clothes but kept her posture straight, her eyes scanning everything. The streets were calm, children playing in yards, neighbors chatting over fences, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Near the end of the street, she noticed a dark sedan parked across from the Johnsons' house. It wasn't a car she recognized. The tinted windows made it difficult to see inside. Lisa slowed her pace, keeping a distance while noting the license plate in her notebook. Her instincts told her this might be connected. She made a mental note to report it to the police if the car stayed longer than necessary. Returning home, she found Mark waiting on the porch, worry etched on his face. "Did you see anything?" he asked. Lisa nodded. "A car. Not from the neighborhood. Possibly surveillance. Could be nothing, but I'm noting it anyway. We can't ignore small signs, they often lead to bigger threats." Mark shivered slightly. "I hate this. I just want things to be normal." Lisa placed a hand on his shoulder. "Normal will return, Mark. But for now, we face reality. And reality is that some people think fear gives them control. We won't let that happen here." The night passed slowly. Every sound outside, the rustling of leaves, the distant barking of a dog, the creak of a gate, made Mark tense. Lisa stayed alert, but she maintained a calm exterior, speaking softly to reassure him whenever his anxiety flared. The next morning, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Lisa approached cautiously, checking the security cameras first. Two men in similar uniforms stood on the porch, holding what appeared to be official papers. She immediately recognized them, the same imposters from 2 days ago. Lisa did not answer the door right away. She spoke through the intercom. "Identify yourselves properly, with name and badge number. Do not step onto the property until I verify with authorities." The men hesitated, glancing at each other nervously. Their confidence from the previous encounter seemed to falter under Lisa's composure. One of them muttered something under his breath and waved the papers aggressively. Lisa sighed. "I see. You have chosen to return. That is a mistake." She stepped back, retrieving her phone to call the police immediately. "Mark, get ready. They're here, and I want the authorities to handle this. I'll maintain control until they arrive." Mark stood behind her, heart pounding. He had never seen Lisa like this, controlled, commanding, calm but ready for anything. He realized that her presence, her training, and her unwavering confidence were exactly what kept their home safe. Within minutes, police cars arrived, lights flashing. The imposters, realizing they had no advantage, attempted to leave, but the officers quickly stopped them. The situation was tense but contained, and Lisa stayed composed throughout, answering every question and providing all the evidence she had gathered. After the police took statements and secured the men, Lisa and Mark finally allowed themselves to breathe. The threat had been neutralized, but the experience had left a mark. That evening, the couple sat on their porch, reflecting on what had happened. The street was quiet again, peaceful in the golden glow of sunset. But Lisa knew the lesson was clear: vigilance, courage, and preparedness were essential in a world where appearances could be deceiving. Mark reached for her hand. "You saved us," he said softly. "Not just from them, but from fear itself. Lisa smiled faintly. We saved each other. Courage isn't about fighting blindly, it's about facing the truth, staying calm, and acting wisely. The neighborhood, once a simple, safe place, now felt different. It was a reminder that danger could appear even in familiar places, and the only way to remain secure was to be aware, ready, and united. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark and Lisa knew that together, they could face anything: imposters, threats, or fear itself. The morning after the second encounter, the Thompsons awoke to a heavy silence. The neighborhood, usually alive with birdsong and children playing, felt oddly subdued. Lisa Thompson, who had spent years in the military, instinctively knew that danger was never random, it often came in patterns. This time, it was clear, the imposters were not going to stop easily. Mark sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, his hands shaking slightly. The events of the past 2 days had left him rattled. He had always trusted the world to be orderly, predictable. Now he was faced with a reality where appearances could be deceiving, and threats could come disguised as authority. Lisa, calm as ever, stood by the window, observing the street. She had learned long ago that fear was only dangerous when it led to indecision. Every movement outside the house, every flicker of shadow, drew her attention. The previous day's encounters had given her valuable information. The men were bold, persistent, and willing to take risks. That made them dangerous, but it also meant that they could be anticipated. We need a plan, Lisa said, turning to Mark. They've tested us twice. Today, we need to be ready for anything. And we cannot act out of anger or panic. We stay calm, we stay focused. Mark nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and anxiety. What do you suggest? He asked. Lisa laid out a strategy. They would secure the house further, keep all doors locked, and monitor the property closely. She would carry her firearm discreetly but visibly enough to remind any potential intruders that they were not dealing with ordinary residents. They would also maintain constant communication with the police, reporting any unusual activity immediately. By mid-morning, Lisa and Mark were on high alert. Lisa walked slowly along the front of the house, observing every corner of the yard, every movement in the street. She noticed a few neighbors peeking from their windows, curiosity and concern evident on their faces. Some had begun to realize that the so-called homeowners association was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Then, she saw them, the same 2 men from the previous encounters, standing near the edge of the street, talking quietly but keeping a close watch on the Thompsons' house. They were dressed similarly to before, dark vests, badges that glimmered in the sunlight. But this time, their posture was more deliberate, their eyes sharp, calculating. Lisa immediately signaled to Mark, who quickly moved behind her. They're back, she whispered. And they're planning something. We need to stay calm and let the authorities handle this, but I want to be ready if they try anything. The men seemed to notice the couple observing them. One of them stepped forward, raising his hand in what might have been an attempt at intimidation. Lisa didn't flinch. Her eyes met his steadily, her stance firm and unwavering. She had faced real danger before, under far more intense circumstances, and she knew the importance of presence, of control. Minutes passed like hours. The imposters seemed to weigh their options, glancing around nervously. Lisa noticed the subtle signs: the twitch of a hand, a shift in weight that suggested they were contemplating a move that could escalate the situation. Suddenly, one of the men reached inside his vest, as if to retrieve something. Lisa's heart rate increased slightly, but her face remained calm. She raised her voice firmly, carrying the authority that years of military training had instilled in her. "Stop right there," she shouted. "Do not make any sudden movements. I am armed and trained. Take a step back, or I will have no choice but to defend my home." The impostors froze, startled by her clarity and confidence. They had not expected such a strong response. Many people, they assumed, would react with fear or hesitation. Lisa's calm and commanding stance was not something they had anticipated. Mark, standing just behind her, felt a mix of fear and awe. He had always known Lisa was strong, but seeing her in action, fully in control, was different. He realized that their safety depended not just on weapons or rules, but on Lisa's presence, the calm authority she projected. The first man muttered something under his breath, seemingly trying to regain composure. The other glanced nervously at him. They clearly had not prepared for resistance of this kind. Lisa noticed their uncertainty and knew this was her advantage. "You've tested our patience twice," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the quiet street. "This is your last warning. Leave now, and we will not involve the authorities further. Step onto our property again, and you will face consequences. Do you understand?" The men exchanged glances, hesitation evident. Lisa's stance, unwavering and confident, communicated more than words ever could. She was not afraid, and she would act if necessary. Then, as if deciding that retreat was wiser than confrontation, the impostors began to back away slowly. Lisa's eyes followed their movements, never letting them out of sight. She maintained her posture, ready for any sudden attack. Mark exhaled slowly, relief mingling with lingering fear. "That could have gone very badly," he said, his voice tight. Lisa nodded. "It could have," she admitted. "But fear alone never decides outcomes. Preparation and control do. And we were prepared." Even after the impostors disappeared from view, Lisa didn't relax completely. She knew that bold people often returned, and she wanted to be ready if they attempted to escalate again. She and Mark documented every detail, descriptions, behaviors, license plates, times, everything. Later that afternoon, Lisa called the local police to give a detailed update. She provided her observations, including the body language, the possible intentions, and the patterns she had noticed. The officers listened attentively, impressed by her clarity and composure. They assured her they would patrol the area and keep a watchful eye on the neighborhood. As the day passed, Lisa and Mark tried to maintain normalcy. They tended to the garden, spoke with neighbors about community safety, and even shared a quiet lunch on the porch. But an underlying tension remained. The neighborhood, once a sanctuary, now felt fragile. Danger had shown its face, and while it had been contained for now, its shadow lingered. By evening, the Thompsons were seated inside, reviewing security footage from the cameras Lisa had installed. Every angle, every frame, was scrutinized. The impostors' movements were carefully tracked, and Lisa noted patterns that might indicate their next attempt. Mark shook his head. "I never imagined something like this could happen here. I always thought our neighborhood was safe." Lisa smiled faintly, though her eyes remained sharp. "It's safe in many ways," she said. "But safety isn't just about surroundings. It's about awareness, vigilance, and courage. People who depend on fear to gain control will always test boundaries. We cannot ignore them. But we can control how we respond." The night grew darker, and the street became quiet again. Lisa stayed alert, her eyes occasionally flicking to the windows. She thought about her military training, the long nights on watch, the careful observation, the discipline to act decisively in tense moments. Those lessons had never seemed more relevant than now. Mark, sensing her focus, leaned back in his chair. "You're incredible," he said softly. "You stayed calm, even when they threatened us." "I don't know if I could do that." Lisa reached for his hand. "It's not about being fearless," she said gently. "It's about controlling your fear. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's taking action in spite of it." The couple sat together, the quiet of the evening surrounding them. Though the imposters had left for now, Lisa knew they were still out there, watching, waiting, perhaps planning another attempt. But she also knew that fear would not dictate their lives. They had survived twice, not through luck, but through preparation, presence, and courage. As midnight approached, Lisa double-checked the doors, ensured all security systems were active, and reviewed the cameras one more time. Mark followed her lead, realizing that their safety depended on vigilance as much as trust in each other. Finally, they went to bed, but sleep was slow to come. Every creak of the house, every distant sound outside, drew their attention. Yet, in the midst of uncertainty, there was a quiet strength. They had faced threats directly and survived. They were prepared to face them again, together. And in that quiet, tension-filled night, the Thompsons understood a fundamental truth: danger could appear anywhere, but courage, calmness, and unity were the real shields that would protect them. The Thompsons woke the next morning with a quiet determination. After the repeated confrontations with the imposters, Mark and Lisa knew they could not remain passive. Their home, their sanctuary, was being threatened, and while the men had left twice without escalation, it was only a matter of time before they returned. Lisa, with her military training, felt the responsibility to not just protect herself and Mark, but to ensure the safety of the neighborhood as well. Mark, still tense but now more confident, helped Lisa review the security footage from the previous days. Every motion, every pause, every subtle behavior of the imposters was noted and catalogued. Lisa had a methodical approach, observing details most people would overlook: the slight hesitation before one of the men raised his hand, the way they surveyed the street while avoiding cameras, the subtle attempts to intimidate residents from a distance. Each detail was a piece of a puzzle. "They are organized," Lisa noted, her finger tracing the path of the imposters on a printout. "This isn't random. They want to control, to intimidate, and they believe fear will make people comply. But they haven't faced someone who won't back down, someone who can respond with calm authority." Mark nodded. "You've done that twice already. But I worry they'll try again, maybe more aggressively next time." Lisa sighed. "Which is why we prepare. We're not going to fight blindly. We control the environment, and if they attempt anything again, we involve the authorities immediately. That's the difference between courage and recklessness." By mid-morning, Lisa had called the local police department once more, providing them with the compiled information, times, descriptions, movements, and even theories about the imposters' methods. The officers were impressed by the thoroughness of her reports. "You've done excellent work documenting everything," one said. "With this information, we can act quickly if they return. You've made this neighborhood safer, just by staying vigilant." Lisa felt a quiet satisfaction but didn't let her guard down. She knew the imposters were unpredictable. Just because the authorities were now aware didn't mean the threat had vanished. In the afternoon, she decided to walk around the neighborhood again. Mark insisted on coming along this time, partly for moral support and partly because he wanted to learn from Lisa's approach to observation. They walked slowly, observing each driveway, each car, each person moving in the streets. The neighborhood appeared calm, but Lisa knew appearances could be deceiving. Near the end of the street, Lisa noticed a familiar sedan parked near the corner. It wasn't the same car as before, but it was clearly watching the neighborhood. She motioned for Mark to stay calm but quiet. "We note it, we don't engage," she whispered. "If they think we'll react emotionally, they'll try to provoke us. Calm observation wins here." They returned home without incident but made immediate notes about the new vehicle. Lisa decided to place additional cameras in the backyard and side entrances, ensuring no approach would go unnoticed. She also reinforced locks and tested motion sensors. Mark assisted where he could, learning quickly from her precise methods. That evening, Lisa and Mark received an unexpected visit from several neighbors. The news of the imposter's actions had spread quickly, and others were now concerned for their own safety. They gathered at the Thompsons' home, sharing stories of suspicious behavior, and many admitted to feeling intimidated but unsure of how to act. Lisa addressed them calmly. "Fear is exactly what they want," she said. "We cannot allow them to control our lives. Document everything, observe without engaging directly, and contact the authorities immediately if they return. We are stronger together, but we must act smart." The neighbors listened intently, impressed by her clarity and authority. For the first time, they felt a sense of empowerment in facing a situation that had seemed overwhelming. Lisa's military background had taught her the importance of leadership in tense situations, and she shared that knowledge without arrogance, guiding the neighbors toward preparedness and confidence. As night fell, the Thompsons retreated to their home, but the tension never fully dissipated. Lisa reviewed the camera feeds once more, and Mark kept watch at the windows. Hours passed slowly, every distant sound causing them to glance toward the street. They remained vigilant, not out of panic, but as a deliberate, strategic precaution. Then, in the late evening, a shadow appeared near the front of the house. Lisa's heart rate increased slightly, but her face remained calm. The imposters had returned this time, more boldly, standing at the edge of the driveway with a strange confidence. They held objects that Lisa couldn't identify from a distance, and their body language suggested they were prepared for confrontation. Lisa raised her voice firmly. "Stop right there. Identify yourselves properly and step away from this property immediately." The men froze, surprised by the firmness and clarity in her tone. They had likely expected fear, hesitation, or confusion. What they encountered instead was control, readiness, and authority. Lisa's posture was deliberate, steady, and commanding. Her hand rested lightly on the firearm she always carried, a visible but non-threatening reminder that she was not defenseless. Mark, standing beside her, felt a surge of admiration. He had known Lisa was capable, but seeing her fully in command of the situation was awe-inspiring. Her calmness, her presence, and her ability to assess the situation instantly had already diffused what could have been a dangerous escalation. The imposters muttered to each other, clearly unsure of how to proceed. Their boldness wavered under Lisa's unwavering gaze. "This is your last warning," she continued. "Leave now, or authorities will be involved immediately. Do not underestimate what it means to threaten this home." For a tense moment, the street was silent. The night air was still, as if holding its breath. The imposters weighed their options, realizing they had miscalculated. Lisa's combination of authority, preparedness, and calm confidence had outmaneuvered them once again. Finally, the men backed away, muttering excuses and retreating down the street. Lisa didn't relax until they were out of sight, keeping her eyes sharp, ready for any sudden move. Afterward, the police arrived again, responding to Lisa's call. They took statements, examined the area, and reassured the Thompsons that the imposters would be investigated. The officers noted Lisa's thorough documentation and calm handling of the situation, praising her vigilance. "You've done everything right," one officer said. "Not many people could handle a situation like this with such control and clarity." Mark wrapped an arm around Lisa as they returned inside. "I'm amazed," he said softly. "You faced them twice, stayed calm, and kept us safe. I don't know how you do it." Lisa shook her head. "It's not about being fearless," she said gently. "It's about preparation, observation, and controlling fear. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting wisely despite it." In the following days, the Thompsons noticed a change in the neighborhood. Other residents, inspired by Lisa's example, became more observant and cautious. Reports to the authorities increased, and the imposters' attempts to intimidate the community became less effective. The once quiet, seemingly naive neighborhood had grown vigilant, organized, and united. Lisa and Mark also took time to reflect privately. They realized that the experience, though frightening, had strengthened their bond. Facing danger together had reinforced their trust, their communication, and their sense of shared responsibility. They had survived threats not through panic or aggression, but through calm, strategic action and mutual support. The Thompsons also understood a broader truth: danger could appear anywhere, even in familiar surroundings. But courage, awareness, and unity were the true shields. They had faced deception and intimidation, yet emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident in their ability to protect themselves and their home. And as the sun set over the quiet streets, Lisa and Mark sat together on their porch, sipping tea, watching the neighborhood return to its peaceful rhythm. The imposters' shadows still lingered in memory, but the light of vigilance, courage, and community shone brighter. The lesson was clear: the real power lies not in the threat, but in the calm, steady response to it. The days following the final confrontation with the imposters brought a cautious sense of relief to the Thompsons' neighborhood. Mark and Lisa woke each morning with a lingering alertness, aware that vigilance was now a permanent part of life. Though the imposters had fled, the experience had left a mark, a reminder that danger could appear even in familiar places. But it also left a lesson: courage, preparation, and unity could overcome fear. Lisa rose early, as she always did, and began her morning routine with calm precision. Coffee in hand, she walked through the garden, checking on the flowers, inspecting the property, and ensuring that all security systems were functioning perfectly. Every camera, every sensor, every locked door was a reassurance that they were prepared for any unforeseen challenge. Mark joined her shortly, still learning to balance caution with normal life. "I never thought we'd have to be this vigilant in our own neighborhood," he said, adjusting the collar of his shirt. Lisa smiled faintly. "Most people don't," she said. "But reality is what it is. Fear is only dangerous when it makes us act without thought. We survived because we stayed calm and planned carefully." The couple spent the morning reviewing the footage from their cameras one last time. They traced every movement of the imposters, noting their patterns and behavior. Lisa's meticulous attention to detail impressed Mark. He realized that preparation was more than a precaution, it was a strategy, a way to take control of a situation that could otherwise spiral out of hand. Later, the couple joined a small neighborhood meeting called by several residents who had been inspired by Lisa's handling of the situation. The gathering was calm but purposeful, with neighbors sharing experiences, asking questions, and seeking guidance on how to keep their community safe. Lisa addressed the group, her voice steady and confident. The imposters were relying on fear, she explained. But fear is only powerful if you let it control your actions. Document everything. Stay aware. Use communication. Call the authorities immediately if something seems off. Most importantly, support each other. Strength comes from unity. The neighbors listened intently. Many admitted they had felt powerless before, but hearing Lisa's approach clear, strategic, and calm gave them a sense of confidence. By the end of the meeting, the community had agreed to work together, sharing information, monitoring unusual activity, and reporting suspicious behavior to the police. Mark looked at Lisa as she spoke. He had always admired her strength, but seeing her take leadership not only for their family but for the entire neighborhood filled him with awe. Lisa's ability to combine discipline, observation, and calm communication had turned fear into empowerment. As evening approached, the Thompsons returned to their home. The street, once tense and uncertain, now felt lighter. Families walked dogs, children played with bikes and balls, and the neighborhood had begun to reclaim its peace. But Lisa and Mark knew the imposters' threat was only neutralized because of careful planning, quick action, and unwavering calm. That night, a final phone call from the police confirmed what Lisa and Mark had hoped: the imposters had been identified, and legal action was underway. Their threats would no longer go unanswered. Relief washed over the couple, but Lisa remained practical. "It's resolved for now," she said softly, "but preparedness is always ongoing. We cannot assume the world will always be kind." Mark nodded. "I understand. But I also see that courage isn't just about facing danger, it's about facing it together, with clear thought and control." The following days were quieter, and life slowly returned to normal. Lisa and Mark resumed their routines, but a subtle change lingered. They moved through the neighborhood with awareness, yet not fear. They greeted neighbors, tended their garden, and enjoyed walks together, knowing that vigilance could coexist with peace. Lisa also began mentoring a few neighbors on basic safety and observation skills. They practiced simple methods to notice unusual activity, communicate effectively, and remain calm under stress. The workshops were casual but powerful, leaving participants with a sense of confidence and unity. Mark joined occasionally, learning alongside others and realizing that preparedness was not about paranoia, it was about responsibility. One afternoon, Lisa noticed a small child playing near the sidewalk. The girl looked up at her and smiled. Lisa smiled back, feeling a deep sense of connection to the community. She realized that what had begun as fear and intimidation had transformed into awareness, resilience, and a strengthened bond among neighbors. Mark joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "You've changed this place," he said quietly. "Not by force, not by fear, but by example. You've shown everyone how to stand strong." Lisa took a sip, her eyes thoughtful. "We've all changed," she said. "The neighbors, us." This experience reminded everyone that courage isn't just for one person. It's for the community, for family, for anyone who needs to feel safe. We stood together, and that made all the difference. As the days turned into weeks, the imposters' influence faded. Law enforcement continued their investigation, ensuring that no further attempts at intimidation could occur. The neighborhood gradually regained its peaceful rhythm. The sound of children's laughter returned to the streets, dogs barked playfully, and neighbors began to trust one another more deeply. Mark and Lisa spent a quiet evening on their porch, the golden sunset casting warm light across their garden. They reflected on the journey, the fear, the tension, the confrontations, and the eventual triumph. Every challenge had tested them, but it had also strengthened their bond, sharpened their awareness, and deepened their sense of responsibility. "You know," Mark said, "I never imagined we'd face something like this here. But I'm proud of us." "Proud of you." Lisa smiled faintly. "Proud of all of us," she said. "This wasn't just about us. It was about the neighborhood, the people around us. Courage multiplies when shared. We stood strong together, and that's what made the difference." The couple sat in quiet reflection as stars appeared in the night sky. The world beyond their street felt safer now, not because danger had vanished, but because they had learned to face it with preparation, calm, and unity. In the following months, the Thompsons continued their routines, but with a newfound confidence. They knew that vigilance and courage were habits, not temporary states. Their home remained a sanctuary, a place of safety, peace, and empowerment. Lisa's calm, strategic leadership had set a standard, and neighbors looked to her example when uncertainty arose. The imposters' attempts had not succeeded, not because of luck, but because courage, awareness, and careful action had prevailed. The Thompsons had faced real threats and emerged stronger, not only protecting themselves but also inspiring their entire community. As the sun rose one morning, Lisa and Mark walked hand in hand down the street. Children waved as they passed, neighbors exchanged friendly greetings, and the neighborhood felt alive again. They had transformed fear into strength, danger into lessons, and tension into unity. Lisa looked around at the familiar faces and the calm streets and smiled. "This is what it's all about," she said softly. "Safety, community, trust, and the courage to stand strong when it matters most." Mark squeezed her hand. "Together," he said. "Together," Lisa echoed, knowing that no matter what challenges might appear in the future, they would face them side by side, ready, prepared, and unafraid. And in that quiet neighborhood, beneath the swaying trees and warm sunlight, life returned to its peaceful rhythm. But the Thompsons and their neighbors carried a deeper understanding of courage, vigilance, and unity, a lesson that would remain with them forever. The street was quiet, the neighborhood was safe, and a sense of lasting resilience filled the air. The imposters had tried to intimidate, but they had underestimated the strength of those who chose to stand together. The Thompsons had faced fear, and through calm, preparation, and unity, they had won not just for themselves, but for the entire community.